It all started off in this direction towards Newdale, Idaho.
We do have a very, very serious problem here at the Teton Dam. The whole north side of the downstream face is caving in. Look, there goes the whole side.
KRXK, we do have an emergency. Everyone below the Teton Dam on the north and south fork of the Teton River, evacuate your homes immediately. Just go.
And I was watching for a little while, and I heard this roar and rumble, and this big wave, just like a maybe 40, 50 foot, it looked like. It was just rolling down through the valley.
And it's just roaring mud, water, roaring and pouring down the Tetons.
And as we slowly come down the Snake River Valley, we see nothing but widespread flooding and destruction.
What can I say? People downstream better get out. People downstream better get out.
Rexburg in those days was a little kind of a one-stop shopping center, but most of America was. And so Main Street was comprised of individual businesses like John Bowen, who had a music business. Best hamburger place in town was not McDonald's or Burger King, it was called Shirley's. It was a small town with small everything. Everybody knew everybody. It was self-contained.
I've just always loved Rexburg ever since I was a college student. Enjoyed the people, enjoyed the atmosphere that's here.
Great neighbors, and for the most part, very little crime. Just is where I wanted to raise my kids.
As Civil Defense Director, I was an advisor to the county commissioners, and my role was to understand what disasters could occur within the community and how to mitigate for those disasters.
We were all interested in the dam being built, and we had just gone up as a family 2 weeks before to see the site, and the reservoir was half full. And it was shocking that it filled so quickly.
It was Friday night. We own an irrigation company. I was up on the Teton River, upstream from the dam. And I thought, well, I'll just go check on the dam. And I noticed two big caterpillars on the toe side of the dam. And I thought, what are they doing there? Well, it turns out they were plugging a hole. And they just couldn't do it. And so I went home and told my wife about it and didn't think any more about it until the next morning.
That very morning that it started happening, I was on my way to work down at, I had a music store on Main Street in Rexburg. I'd been there about 25 years, and it was full of beautiful merchandise, pianos and organs, guitars, everything. And the radio station put over the air that the Teton Dam was looking like it would collapse or break because there's water starting to come from the back of the dam.
We do have a very, very serious problem here at the Teton Dam. The whole north side of the downstream face, the downstream side of the dam, the whole north side is caving in.
I called the sheriff and said, what are you preparing for? He said, we're preparing to probably have maybe 6 inches or 4 or 5 inches on Main Street in Rexburg. So we've kind of put a bullet now to put some sandbags up against the doors just so it won't flood under your door.
So we were painting the soffit around the edge of the home, and we were in the middle of that when my wife Ruth decided she needed to go to town and pick up some things.
I had the 3 children, jumped in the car, drove down our lane, and Carl Edwards, dear friend, was in the middle of the road waving me down. And he told me, he says, the dam just broke. And I says, yes, right. No, the dam just broke and we need to evacuate. By then, I believed him, turned around, drove home. Larry was on the roof painting. I hollered at him and said, we need to go and we need to go right now.
And I still had paint in my in my can, and I was thinking all along, it couldn't have failed. It was only half full 2 weeks ago.
I was at home. My mom and I were there. I was doing some chores, and one of my chores was to dust. My brother David and his friend, Daryl Griggs, had gone fishing that morning. And as I was dusting, I happened to turn the radio on. It was talking about the Teton Dam breaking. And I thought about it for a little bit, and I went in and asked my mom. I said, Mom, on the radio it says that the Teton Dam is breaking. And her eyes just got huge, and she said, what? And about that time, we heard some people going up and down the street yelling to evacuate.
It was decided that Commissioner Walker and myself would go out the airport and catch the plane and go up to the flood. And we could see as we flew up a cloud of dust, probably, I estimate 100 feet, maybe 50 to 100 feet in front of it. The water was just a little bit, not quite to Wilford yet, not quite to the church house. There was a lot of water coming. It was high and running fast in our estimation. And so immediately I got on the radio and called back and said we need to have the sirens blow.
I was 5 years old, and my mom decided I needed some new Sunday shoes. So I was in my best Sunday dress, I guess, so we can match the shoes to the dress. And we were ready to walk out the door, and we had a knock at the door, and it was a policeman, and he said, the Teton Dam has broken, you need to get out. So I had an older brother and a little brother at the time, and my mom was 8 months pregnant with my sister. And at the time, my dad was up on our farm just about a half a mile away. So we jumped in our car and went up there and told my dad and his brothers. We only had time to grab diapers for my little brother, who was still in diapers, and I think that's all we grabbed.
My husband and I, it was about noon. We were playing the radio, and we heard Don Ellis. He was flying over the dam site, I believe, in a small plane. The dam had burst, and he was very excited and very adamant that people needed to move to high ground.
Look, there goes the whole side. There goes the whole complete side of the north edge of the Teton Dam. And the water in monumental, holy, great, what can I say? People downstream better get out. People downstream better get out.
This is KRXK. We do have an emergency. Everyone below the Teton Dam on the north and south fork of the Teton River, evacuate your homes immediately. Just go.
We drove up to the hill in Rexburg, up by Ricks College, to watch. And the hill was packed with people. That's where most people went for safe ground.
And I was watching for a little while, and I heard this roar and rumble, and this big wave, just like a maybe 40, 50 foot looked like. It was just rolling down through the valley. And I thought, oh my gosh. And there's cattle in this thing roll. I could see them. I got some binoculars, went up there, and cars and all kinds of wildlife and everything. Just, it was pushing everything ahead of it.
Wilford was hit the most dramatically, as some of the accounts say that the waves were, the water was 30 feet high at the point when it hit their home. And so another person said in his narrative, we didn't have minutes to get out, we had seconds, right? And so 5 of the 11 deaths were in Wilford.
I remember so well standing in the ballroom at Ricks College, looking out those north-facing windows and watching the flood roll in Sugar City and past Sugar City and onto our house. And all these hundreds of people knowing that this is our houses that are gone.
It went through a logging company on the north side of town, and so it picked up 1,000 or more logs on that, and they become part of the ramming. First north, there was a pile of logs and debris, bushes and parts of machinery and everything stacked as high, maybe as 15 to 20 feet. And because of that, it was directing the water opposite of what we thought.
In my mind's eye, I can still see that building. An engineering firm, as the water hit it, kind of raised up a few feet and then wobbled back and forth and then washed across the road and hit a power pole or something. And then that building just started going to all pieces and everything.
So I called a friend of mine, Henry Wyke, and he was up on the bank building. And he said, "Oh, John, there's 8 feet at least of water coming down through town, down Main Street." And he says, "Your windows on the front of your music company just burst." And the water poured in there, and he said, pianos and organs are floating out the window and floating down Main Street, and he said all kinds of instruments. And so I said, well, there's not much we can do. We'll just have to wait and see after the water subsides.
We were standing at Ricks College campus watching the water go by, and then as we could look out and see a couple of houses floating by, we knew it was bad.
Watched houses float by, watched portions of barns float by. The initial wave just came and went through, and that was it. And then it was gone. It was gone by 4 or 5 o'clock.
It looked like, I'd been through 2 hurricanes, and it was easy. Looked like another hurricane had gone through.
I believe that it was about the time we were leaving the driveway. My dad came in and he was driving very fast, and he said, "Where's David?" And my mom told him that he had gone fishing with Daryl. And I could see that they were both just heartsick and worried.
As the flood came through town, it just was devastating. We saw businesses, homes destroyed. We saw the mud. We saw everything. We took a ride out to Sugar City. We saw the railroad track that was lifted up, and it looked like a picket fence. It was still attached to the ties. It was just bizarre. The road was actually lifted up, the asphalt, and moved about 20 feet parallel to the regular roadway. The power of it was overwhelming.
My dad was very anxious, and he said, "I'm gonna go drive around." I said, "Can I go with you, Dad?" So we drove in to Teton City, and we drove up to the water's edge. And we got out, he got his field glasses, and we were just looking out. My dad said to me, he says, "Be quiet." And I said, "What's the matter, Dad?" And he said, "There's somebody over in that tree." And he started yelling. We were conversing back with what we later found out was Daryl. And he was up in some trees, and he was yelling back to us, "It's just me." My dad radioed and got help to come, and they sent out a boat, and we watched them rescue Daryl.
There was one fellow over there, and he was hollering for help. So we managed to get a boat and a motor, and 3 of the fellows went across, and a big wave had put him up in that tree, and you can see it's about 10 feet up there. And he had come downstream from the Gardner Dam, which I understand is about 3 or 4 miles upstream.
Lucky young man. He has a collapsed lung. Now they're going to try to get him across this floodwater to where they get him over here on this side to safety.
We were both very anxious about maybe my brother was in another tree or somewhere. So at this point, we had hope that we would find my brother. That night was a very sleepless night, as you can imagine. And communication was very poor because phone lines were down.
Our immediate response, we knew we were going to have some help for housing. That was a concern. What were we going to do with the people that lost their homes? So we worked with President Irving and Ricks College, and they opened up all of their housing for people to come in. They brought their families with them that needed to. Bedding arranged for them so they'd have bedding. Food service made arrangements to have food to feed their families. And I think that first night there was over 2,000 people that received a meal on campus. But that was our immediate response. Let's get food and shelter for those that their homes were destroyed.
After things had settled down, we drove down the street, looked around, and the water had all subsided and gone on down the river, and it was getting dark, and all you could hear was cattle off in the distance, just in an uproar. There were no lights around. It was just totally dark. When we went to bed, it was just kind of eerie.
We had to move the command center from downtown at the courthouse up on the hill. There was an Army Reserve up there by Ricks College at that time. And we moved all the command center and all the personnel that needed to be in that command center up there.
Church was working on it as well. I remember the next day there was a board there up on the hill where we were staying at the time. That board started out, it appeared to be 200 or 300 names on it. And after a meeting with church officials, our attitude was that the home teachers should be called and get a report. And so after that was done, by that afternoon, we probably had no more than 15 or 20 names on the board.
Still, we're at this point where we don't know where David is, and we're hoping for his safety. The good members of our community were out in their boats, and they were going around that area a lot where we found Daryl. And my dad, and I believe it was Craig Hawes, looked over and they saw my brother's hair in the brush. And what a great blessing that they found his body. So truly, it was an answer to prayer that they were able to recover his body, and we were able to have the time to be able to put his body to rest in the proper way. Because there are people's vehicles, huge cars that have never even been found. To this day, they were buried. And the fact that his body was not buried in all that mud is just simply a miracle.
All the officers, their homes were destroyed, except me and I think one other. And they had nothing on but their uniform. And we had like 11, 12 homes on the golf course. We had debris all over. I had the opinion that, at one time that a flood would be just nice, clear water, and just a matter of letting it drain and everything would be okay. But of course, this proved to be just otherwise.
It was filthy with the debris that was being pushed in front of it. Here's a wall of water 15 feet high, and it's got bales of hay. You'd see it hit hay stacks, and they would explode. It was rolling cars, combines, tractors, any of the debris that you'd have on a farm, much less the animals, being tumbled in front of it at a very good pace as it came down the valley.
And all those cattle, dead cattle and so on, and a lot of them ended up in the city of Rexburg.
Our home was actually spared as far as physical things were concerned. Our yard was loaded with gravel and mud. We called it not just mud, it was the cake. It was like clay. It would stick to your body, to your feet.
I can bring up the smell of that mud. It's a smell that you just cannot forget. To me, it smelled like mud and death. It just was a horrible smell.
There was maybe a foot or more of just slime mud, and you couldn't hardly shovel it because it was too runny. But when that dried up, it was so hard you almost needed a shovel or something to break it. And it became very difficult to clean the homes as they did.
People in the higher places in town that were not touched by the flood helped clean up. People from up on the hill were just really generous with their time. To fix breakfast for several thousand people, they had to get up like at 4 o'clock in the morning or earlier and come down and help assist the food services.
So grateful for the dormitories and for the college and all that they did for the people of the valley and fed them, and people showered up there because they were working in the muck.
And I also went up to Ricks College to help in the man-wearing center with the food lines, and people would come in just covered in that horrible mud and would look so tired, and we would feed them sandwiches and soup or chili, things like that. And I remember looking into this big pot of chili, and I'd look at the line, and I looked at the pot, and I looked at the line again, and I thought, this isn't gonna, we don't have enough. What are we gonna do? But when the last person went through the line, the last bit of the chili was served to them, and there was enough.
People helped people irrespective of whether I knew you or not, whether you were my neighbor or not. It was an incredibly open feeling across the board. No matter where you went, it was, you got a problem, I'm here to help.
We had farmers from around the area who were not hurt at all, who brought their tractors with pumps to pump out basements. And they'd just drive along the road and then stop and say, do you need your basement pumped? And it happened. And no compensation. It was just done out of their hearts and done very well.
Everybody just helped everybody. We'd meet in different places, and by the time the Red Cross came here, this is interesting, I think, for people to realize too, by the time they arrived, they talked to President Eyring and President Ricks, who was a stake president of this area, and they said, what can we do to help? And they said, well, I think we got it pretty well covered.
We had a lot of outside help, especially at the beginning, where all these busloads of volunteers would show up in Rexburg and disperse, and that really was a shot in the arm to people.
And I met some Mennonites there, and I met some Quakers there. I think I met almost every religion you could imagine in here helping us clean this place up. The Baptists, the Methodists, the Catholics, all of them wonderful people. And the first thing they'd say when they get off the bus, we came here to help, what can we do? Show us. We can come back for 3 or 4 days in a row. We're staying in a motel in Idaho Falls, which is close by. We can come up every day for a few days. It was just a marvel to me how people who love God and love our Savior, regardless of what faith they belong to, how they clung together and came up to help us.
Sometimes it's real easy to get caught up in yourself. And I remember that our Young Women's Organization went to the stake center and gathered together, and we had many people coming from out of town, and many children needed to be cared for. And I remember them calling and asking if I would go, and I was very happy to go and serve and help out those, and it was very healing for me to see the people rallying around and their wading boots on and digging through the mud. Because our devastation was different, but serving others was very healing.
On the next Sunday, President Kimball came, and he came with Elder Packard. They came in a helicopter. I can still remember the helicopter landing on campus. It was in the baseball field at that time.
Here was all these Latter-day Saints wearing whatever clothes they had left. And some of us were mud splattered because we'd been working in our homes wherever we needed to. And his upbeat way of talking to us, telling us that Rexburg would rebuild again, and it would be better than it was before. And that certainly has come true.
My mother didn't want to go because she didn't have any dress clothes. And I says, you know what, the prophet's not going to worry about that. Let's just go. So we went. And it was so neat to listen to him talk to us. And it was about helping each other. Just go to work, he said. And that was his message. Just go to work.
A lot of people mention it in their stories that when the prophet came, it was sort of a turning point for them because it showed the concern that he would make this visit in person was really significant to them. And it also, in the research that I've done, having a religious belief system can actually help you recover from trauma more quickly because you have a very clear structure to kind of frame events in. And so a lot of people would reference, well, President Kimball said we weren't being punished for anything. So there was kind of this sense like, why did this happen to us? You know, did we do something wrong? And so a lot of them kind of really took that as, okay, well, that helps me frame these events. And also that I'm going to use his advice to kind of guide what I do in this recovery effort.
I was a baptized member, but I was less active until about age 40. My oldest son was getting prepared for a mission, and I knew that as a father I needed to get lined up. And really the turning point for me was when President Kimball came up. I was asked to be part of that security group, and when we were lined up and the president walked down the line and was shaking hands and came across to me, and there was something about him that was totally different. There was no doubt in my mind that he was the prophet, and that feeling never left. Shortly after then, I become active, and I've been that way ever since.
Why did the dam break in the first place? I can't answer that one, but the Lord knew.
We had 2 little boys whose bedroom was downstairs. If that had happened at midnight and washed over us with no warning, who's to say how many lives would have been lost?
Consider what this would have been like had that dam broken in February. Same water, same volume, but that would have flooded, that would have flowed in February, and the valley would have stayed frozen until June. And you can attribute that any way you'd like. I think that's divine intervention.
Well, I don't think the Heavenly Father caused the flood, but he certainly helped people fix it.
The community really pulled together. It's hard to explain, but I'm sure the Lord had his hand in all of this.
Well, I hope we learned patience, and I hope we learned the art of giving of ourselves and helping others. And if we did that, we were a success.
And I've been in a few disasters myself, other than that one, but I've never seen harmony that close where people were so lovingly helping each other. And I think that's the purpose of the gospel of Jesus Christ, is to serve one another and to help one another whenever we see a need to do that. And there's needs all about us every day.
As I look back on that 15-year-old girl, me during that disaster, the lessons that I learned truly shaped me. I learned that the best way to deal with hard things is to step outside of yourself and lend a hand to those around you. And that we in life, we can either choose to be bitter or we can choose to be better. Choosing to become better is what our Heavenly Father wants us to do. That's what this life is about, is helping our brothers and sisters around us through their tragedies, through their daily lives.